Imagine being 5 years old, sitting on a crinkled paper-covered exam table with your feet dangling. Now imagine the ominous beeping noises and the needles that look much too long and sharp for your tiny arm. When we think about medical innovation, we often think about life-changing technologies, like a cure to cancer or just faster and smarter technologies. But we often overlook a simple question. Who were these innovations actually made for? For example, we can take a ventricular assist device, or VAD, which is a medical device that is intended to act as an artificial heart. This is an adult's VAD, and this is a child's. Can you see a difference? Well, that's a problem. There isn't much of one. Because while medicine races forward, pediatric care is too often left behind, struggling to catch up. Children aren't just smaller adults. They think differently, heal differently, and experience illnesses in ways that scientists still struggle to fully understand. Yet most of the technologies used to treat them is adapted for adult medication, scaled down rather than thoughtfully innovated. This introduces a further problem because this isn't just a developmental and structural limitation. This is deeply human. It influences how children experience healthcare, how families understand their treatment, and how early healthcare experiences can influence long-term trust in medicine. I first started thinking about this issue because of a simple realization. Some of the most stressful moments of a child's life happens in the very place that was designed to help them. I remember one time while sitting in the waiting room, I was coloring while waiting for my routine examination. When I looked across the table, I saw a little boy clutching his mother's arm so tightly his knuckles were white. Every time the exam door opened, he looked around anxiously and pulled his mom closer. What struck me in that moment wasn't his fear, it was the familiarity of the situation. Because almost everyone can remember an experience like this in either a doctor's office, a hospital, or a dentist's office, where they felt uncertain, uncomfortable, or just isolated. And this pattern doesn't just show a behavioral response. This is a structural limitation, and biology can actually serve to explain why. A child's brain is still developing. The prefrontal cortex, which is the area of their brain that is responsible for emotional regulation, reasoning, and complex explanation, is still developing throughout their adolescence. Meanwhile, their amygdala, which is responsible for fight or flight responses, is highly active earlier on during development. This causes a developmental imbalance where emotional processing precedes cognitive regulation. Furthermore, pain itself is neurologically shaped by emotions. When a child experiences fear or a threat, their hypothalamus pituitary adrenal axis is activated. This process it releases stress hormones like cortisol. In regulated amounts, cortisol is protective. It prepares the body for response to danger. However, research by Professor J.D. Buckner from the National Institute of Health reveals that this repeated activation of these stress systems can ultimately lead a child to feel more emotionally unstable, be more susceptible to stress, and ultimately be more avoidant of healthcare. Imagine trying to explain an MRI machine to a child. To an adult, it's just a diagnostic tool. However, to a child, it is like being slid into an unfamiliar, loud tunnel while strangers tell you not to move. Or consider the experience of wearing a heart monitor. It's just an inconvenience to an adult, but to an adult, to a child, it is a foreign device that can get in the way of play or be embarrassing. However, there are some innovations that are serving to reduce this gap. Many hospitals are including rocket ships or pirate ships that are MRI devices to reduce anxiety in younger children. Furthermore, there are prosthetics that are looking like superhero components or are colorful to help increase confidence and decrease self-consciousness. However, these medical innovations may seem small. They are just as important as larger innovations like a cure to cancer. They reflect larger systematic processes in healthcare where the experience itself of the procedure impacts just as much as the actual process. However, this increased innovation has its negative effects, including the potential risk that developmental and emotional dimensions of care become less considered. This is why pediatric care is so much more than just a. That's why fixing the pediatric innovation gap is more than just bridging the pediatric medicine. It is redefining what healthcare truly means and allowing for more human-centered healthcare as a whole. Thank you.